Welcome to all my Based Heads. This is Professor Base from Base So Hard University coming to you with a new series, Base Reports, where we explore and debunk the common narratives of the Marxist establishment, be they historical, cultural, or political. Be sure to toss me a like and subscribe if possible to catch the rest of the series. And with that said, let us begin. In last week's presidential debate, Kamala Harris made a rather remarkable and tone-deaf statement. She claimed on September 10th, the eve of the 23rd anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks, that the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Anyone with even a cursory knowledge of history should be stupefied by such a statement. But this is, of course, precisely what they count on, that people will not have a cursory knowledge of history. This video seeks to remedy that and give viewers a quick overview of modern attacks on the Capitol and the left's hypocrisy regarding them. In modern history, there were a few lone wolf type attacks carried out against the Capitol in the first half of the 20th century, none of which resulted in casualties. They were largely the product of mentally disturbed individuals and should not be classified as terrorist attacks. However, that changed in the second half of the 20th century. On March 1st, 1954, the Capitol suffered a terrorist attack at the hands of Puerto Rican separatists. 4 Puerto Rican terrorists stormed the Capitol, unfurled a Puerto Rican flag, and began shooting at representatives who were debating an immigration bill. 4 representatives were shot. 1 was wounded seriously. Thankfully, there were no deaths. The terrorists were arrested, tried, found guilty, and sentenced to what amounted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Obviously, the Democrats were outraged at this attack on democracy in its holiest temple. I'm just kidding. President Jimmy Carter commuted all of the terrorist sentences in 1979 and freed them from prison. They then returned to Puerto Rico, where they were given a hero's welcome by their supporters. The next notable attack on the Capitol took place in 1971 at the hands of the Weather Underground, a domestic Marxist terrorist organization active in the 60s and 70s. The group went on a bombing campaign, supposedly in protest of the Vietnam War, but in reality they were a communist revolutionary group who modeled themselves after Mao's Red Guard, and they wished to unleash a communist revolution in the U.S., which they imagined would see tens of millions of Americans sentenced to re-education camps and or killed. On March 1st, 1971, one of those bombs detonated in a bathroom directly beneath the chamber of the U.S. Senate. Thankfully, there were no casualties. The group issued a statement saying they had attacked the, quote, very seat of U.S. white arrogance, unquote. Familiar language from the familiar crowd. Bizarrely, no arrests were made, despite the fact that the group's leadership and members were a matter of public record. Those leaders included Bill Ayers, his wife Bernadine Dorn, John Jacobs, and Howard Machtinger. No patterns to notice there. Despite the lack of arrests, obviously the Democrats and the left denounced and distanced themselves from a Maoist revolutionary group engaged in domestic terrorism, including attacking the very citadel of our democracy. Just kidding. Every one of those people went on to become prominent in academia, the law, and leftist political circles. Machtinger went on to work for the School of Education at the University of North Carolina, where he collaborated with South African Marxists, educators, to promote cross-cultural exchange. Bernadine Dorn went into the legal profession, where she was hired at the Chicago law firm Sidley Austin, despite her felonious criminal record, because, as her boss, Howard Trianens, put it, we often hire friends. She then moved on to become an adjunct professor at the Northwestern University School of Law, where she remained for 25 years, retiring in 2012 with a pension and still defiantly referring to herself as a radical. It was Dorn's husband, Bill Ayers, who went on to have the most influential career. Like the others, Ayers was welcomed post-terrorism into academia with a warm embrace. He became a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago and the College of Education with a specialty in social justice. He became prominent in shaping the curriculum and development of the Chicago public school system, and for this great success, he was named Citizen of the Year. It was during this time he met one Barack Obama, to whom he became a political mentor. In fact, Obama's first political campaign for the Illinois State Senate was launched with a fundraising campaign event in the home of, wait for it, Bill Ayers. In a little more than a decade, the small-time Chicago hustler with the domestic terrorist benefactors would be ensconced in the White House. So to recap, domestic Maoist terrorists launched a bombing campaign against the U.S. government, including at the U.S. Capitol building. And not only were none of the terrorists arrested, but many of them rose to prominent positions in academia, law, and the Democratic Party. But for some strange reason, that is not seen as a threat to our sacred democracy. 2 bombing attacks occurred at the Capitol in 1983. The first on October 18th was carried out by Israel Rubinowitz. Yeah, that's his real name. He attempted to detonate a bomb but was stopped by Capitol Police before he could. After his arrest, he gave his motivation as hoping to bring attention to world hunger. He was given a 6-month suspended sentence and deported to Israel. Must be nice. I bet Stuart Rhodes wishes he had his lawyer. On November 7th of that same year, the Weather Underground was back at it. This time was their splinter group, the Armed Resistance Unit. This time, instead of the Vietnam War, they used the conflict in Grenada as a pretext. They planted bombs in the Capitol, as well as at other government targets over the next few months. After a multi-year investigation, 7 members of the group were arrested, including ringleaders Sarah Evans and Susan Rosenberg. They were all sentenced to many decades in jail, and the Democrats and the left rightfully condemned such domestic terrorism. Just kidding. On his last day in office, Bill Clinton, no doubt cashing a big check sent from somewhere, commuted the sentences of Evans and Rosenberg. Call me crazy, but I'm starting to believe that the Democrats don't actually care that much about attacks on our democracy. Of course, pointing out the left's hypocrisy is a futile endeavor. Pointing out someone's hypocrisy only works if someone is capable of shame. And make no mistake, the communist is completely shameless. They've spent years lecturing the public about our democracy, coming on the heels of them stealing an illegitimate and fraudulent election in which they disenfranchised half the country. In this cycle, they rigged their own primary for the 3rd consecutive time and delivered up a candidate that is historically unpopular and nobody ever actually voted for. If they were vulnerable to hypocrisy, they would have perished long ago. They are impervious to their own hypocrisy because they don't care about the truth. They cannot be negotiated with using facts or even morality. They are a death cult. Bill Ayers, the Weather Underground leader, said it best himself. Quote, "I don't regret setting the bombs. I only regret not setting more." End quote. Mind you, he said this to a friendly news outlet when trying to rehabilitate his image during Obama's first presidential run. Even at his own personal and political peril, he couldn't help but brag about the violence he had unleashed. This is a member of a death cult. Negotiate with him in good faith at your own risk. As this video was in production, there was a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump in the span of 3 months. I assure you, there will be more. Did this stop and make the left pause and reflect? Of course not. They blamed Trump and his rhetoric for the very violence they were in fact committing. Let me end this video on a hard truth that many have not yet grasped to their own detriment. Your political opponents are not misguided. These are not disagreements of policy which can be negotiated and compromised upon. They are communists, and they know exactly what they are doing. And when dealing with communists, you have 2 choices. Line them up against the wall, or allow them to line you and your family up against the wall. You may not want it to be this way, but that is no matter. It is a binary choice. Choose wisely.